Sweet. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Construction Technology Podcast. Today's Friday. We're joined by Micah from Knutson Construction. I'm Luigi, CEO at Provision. I'm joined by my co-hosts Mike at Build Vision and Andrew from Join. What's up, gentlemen? Happy Friday.
Morning.
Happy
Andrew,
Friday.
I'll pass it over to you.
Great. So, welcome, Micah, to the podcast. We've known each other for 2 years now, 3 years now, something like that. But bumped into each other in Phoenix and thought it would be fun to have you on. So, thank you for coming on.
Happy to be
I think,
here.
yeah, good. I think when we met, you were about to take a red eye from the steak restaurant to Washington, D.C. in order to go to a combined AIA AGC event on, well, I thought it was design assist, and you quickly corrected me to say that it was delegated design. And so, like, somewhere in there, we should probably, for those who don't know, delineate the difference between the two. But yeah, what was that event? It sounded interesting.
Sure. Yeah, so thanks for having me first. But yeah, that AIA AGC Joint Council I learned is the longest standing committee that either of those associations have, and it's going on over 100 years. So I was accepted to that committee recently, and that was my first meeting. So it's a group of representatives from the AIA, the Architects National Group, and AGC, the National General Contractors Group. And they recently just put together a white paper on collaboration. And then the next topic that we're focusing on is delegated design. So design assist, as you mentioned, that's more early onboarding of contractors to help and be kind of consulted to as the design develops. Delegated design is truly just turning over the engineering detailing of certain trades and specific scopes to the trade contractor, typically. So a lot of times it's curtain wall, roofing, a lot of enclosure things, but it's getting to be more and more things. Anything that has specific structural things or material limits, architects and engineering firms are taking their hands off it and saying, we'd like to push that downstream, which as a contractor is kind of attractive just because we are willing to price risk, include it, and take more and more. I've talked with architects that are wondering what's going on, right? And anyway, so it's just an interesting conversation. I thought that it was going to be a conversation of architects saying, hey, this is spinning out of control. Maybe let's put the back. And really it's, no, we want to be design only. And so anyways, that was the overall conversation. It's going to keep developing in our future committee meetings. But with technology and AI and where it's going, there's other people thinking that this architecture discipline is going to be radically changing. And what are they going to hang on to anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated that my guess would have been like, okay, there's a lot of billable hours in details. Why would they want to push them out to someone else? Architects also have a reputation of sort of really desiring control to the greatest extent possible. So they're giving up control and they're giving up, I think a significant business line. So like what drives the AIA's representatives' willingness to push this, or desire, not even willingness, desire to push this downstream?
I think it's just around risk and not knowing how to really capture it at the speed they need to in their documents. But so for instance, there's so many detailed and high performance materials and things to be able to detail out to capture the. Am I the only one with terrible audio? Or is it I feel like I'm getting a loud buzz. But
Mike, it might be coming from you. Could you mind going on mute? There you go.
okay. So yeah, I feel like they're pushing the risk out and trying to hang on to whatever's left. But what I found interesting in that conversation is that the things they're clinging to is like their firm's wall types, right? Like my wall type is called this. And to me, those are the things that should just be anonymized or everyone agree to that, hey, a B4 wall type is this many layers of drywall and this and that. And then they should cling to the design and using the right materials and everything else. So it's interesting in the sense that the things that I think technology can solve for, they want to hold on to. But again, if a contractor could hire an architect, figure out the programming, run a zillion scenarios of how to lay out a clinic or something, right? There's just less and less expertise that they have. So kind of talked in circles there, but that's what I found interesting.
So it's like an aversion and a risk aversion leads to like this ever shrinking, island of expertise that the AIA is trying to balance on top of. Yeah, I don't know that bodes well for the profession, but What does it do for like scoping these projects? Like Luigi, do you bump into like delegated design in scoping land?
Yep.
Does it
Yeah,
simplify
all the time.
things?
Well, we pull out delegated design requirements, and those are kind of scattered everywhere, specs and drawings. But I don't know if it really changes like the scoping conversation that much. It's just something that you end up flowing down to your sub.
But like you're sort of don't like your is the design scope separate from the construction scope? Like when you do delegated design, do you procure it design build, or is it like I delegate the design to you, you're going to come back, and then presumptively you're going to win
Mhm.
the construction
There's
contract?
different flavors of it from at least from what I've seen. I know Micah's experience might be different, but we'll typically see it for like very specific elements of construction. Like, hey, we haven't designed these rods to bear capacity for anything over X. You're responsible for retaining a structural consultant based on the equipment that you think is required. It could be based on like a performance type spec. So it's not always like, hey, everything about mechanical needs to be designed. And so that's your responsibility. I typically see it as there are very specific elements here that we have not accounted for because we don't know the answer to what type of equipment is going to be provided or what your trade is specifically going to do.
So it might
Yeah,
not
yeah.
be. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I was
What's
just
that,
gonna
Mike?
say same thing happens on the mechanical side, right? Like
Mm.
they're like you have a 2D ductwork layout, but like the mechanical subcontractor owns the actual ductwork capacities, flow, like actually meeting the requirements of the project. And like there's that a lovely line of you own intent. So I'd say on the mechanical electrical side, it's kind of always been like that because there isn't a right answer, right? I'm sitting in a room right now. There's not a right answer that says, "Hey, I need this exact piece of equipment with this exact ductwork." There's a trillion iterations. And I think what makes that interesting is that example is like we're starting to see tools that allow you to do trillions of iterations of design to find the optimal, like Monte Carlo best position of equipment. Where historically, going into Revit, it might take time to change layouts to do X, Y, and Z. Now you can run it a million times. It doesn't really matter because there's not actually any engineering resources that are going behind it. Tools like HVACR does this, for example, and a mechanical engineer can actually start like playing around with best optimization and swapping out equipment.
Mm.
So actually like empowers them, which I think is interesting. It like empowers the engineer to actually make a better decision instead of relying on, hey, I talked. So right now, like that engineer might engage with a manufacturer rep in a market, and that manufacturer rep will sell them on their product line. What we're seeing in market now is those engineers have exposure to everything in that kind of market from multiple manufacturers rep because it's not a lot of work for the manufacturers rep to give them that insight. So they can go play with different scenarios. Again, mechanical is very, very funky because you can't like the way you design a building is like averages based on winter, spring, fall, summer, and you could have a hot season, a dry season. So it's very, very hard to get the right answer. And I'm curious, it seems like that makes sense in curtain wall, in structural things where it's not something you can go to Home Depot and be like, I'm going to buy this piece of skewed item. So anything outside of SKU land, like engineered design systems, I think really benefit from that. And again, mechanical engineers that are good at this make more money doing what they're doing. So does that make architects make more money doing what they're doing because they're able to consult and have a really strong conversation and iterate them more effectively?
Aren't they? But
Yeah, I
they're
see it.
pushing the iteration and consulting. Sorry, Mike, I think I cut you off.
No, it was me.
Go ahead, Andrew.
I was just going to ask, like, but how could they make more money unless they're working for
You're
like?
selling the outcome. So if you're normalized, if you're leveling up and everyone has
But
the same access,
They're not selling
but they
the out.
are.
Like, no, they're
They
selling
are.
like they're selling
Engineers are
design
starting to do
intent.
this. Because engineers are starting to do this. They're selling. So, example, there's an engineering firm in LA called Taylor Engineers. Taylor
Oh,
Engineers,
they're offering the equipment as well.
they're offering the full service. So they're like, hey, but we want to benefit on the upside of that. And they're very, very profitable doing it. Fun fact about Taylor Engineers, the owner's son is Brett Taylor, who's on the board of OpenAI. But like that entire position is making Taylor Engineers a very profitable entity. So they'll go to Meta. Meta loves them as a customer or as an engineer for a designer. That company makes more money doing that than they would historically do. Because like again, I know before the camera went live, we talked about like door counting. No one's making money off of door counting or fan counting or GRD counting. It needs to be done. The owner. It should come from the engineer regardless. But so like in that world, you're providing an expertise service, which is the same in every other industry. Again, my example of legal, you pay for the person on the other side to provide business advice for your lawyer, not necessarily someone that can process a NDA faster.
Yeah,
And that's the outcome they're going to start selling.
I think where we're seeing on the contracting side where it's sometimes at odds is Luigi, I think you threw up performance spec. That's absolutely how it should be written, but it's sometimes trying to be written as a prescriptive spec, or it needs to look exactly like this. But then because of the material limits or all of these things, the size of glass you can get or how high, a stud can actually work, all of these types of things, right? Well, if you're passing on the risk in engineering, you need to also be flexible and make it more performance requirement. And those aren't always at odds. So I think if they can be flexible to design so all these iterations can be ran and then they can be open to the result, like that's great. But you can't say prescriptive and then pass on delegated design in a competitive environment when people are going to use all of their ingenuity to try to make something work and then get shut down, saying, no, it needs to look exactly like this. So that's where.
Have you found hospitals to be comfortable with giving away that flexibility?
I would say our long-term clients, typically, for whatever reason, they might trust us that we are just maybe more practical. And I could give a very specific example of curtain wall where the architect and engineering team had delegated design for curtain wall and also a lot of the concrete structure, but they had very specific deflection limits and things that they wanted how it to perform, but that was at odds with expansion and contraction of glass. So you now need control joints at every floor for this glass. Well, now they don't like how that looks, right? And it went around and around for months. And then the hospital, I think, let common sense prevail that something needed to give, either deflection limits and the performance requirements or the looks, right? And we weren't trying to make an uglier hospital, right? So luckily, common sense usually prevails. And I do feel like the wind is shifting to common sense because owners really want high performance, they want options, and they want the most for their money, right? And they want to look good, things. So if we can get those things in line, that's where I think, kind of as a pre-con guy, where contractors are a good spot to help.
Maybe just one last question for me, because I'm curious on the delegated design, like a lot of the topics we're talking about, if I'm designing the curtain wall, there's going to be impact on other trades, right? Like, how does that, like fire stopping or something like that, like is going to be really dependent on the design of the curtain wall. And like, I'm imagining there are probably mechanical impacts and so forth. Like, how does that get coordinated? Or am I just completely imagining a problem?
No, I mean, that's pre-con. Yeah, who has the fire
Pre-con.
stopping?
Okay,
Who
so,
has
so
it's
the
scoping.
builder
Yeah.
ends up running around and sort of nudging people
Yeah.
towards a common sense outcome.
Yep. Yeah,
But
and we
like,
decide, do we want to buy it from 5 trades or do we want one fire stopper or do we want, and who has that insulation in the parapet or the insulation behind the metal panel in the curtain wall? And those might be 3 trades, it might be 1 trade, or who's carrying those. So that's
okay, so
all of that.
they're doing delegated design, but you still have
Yep.
all the exposure to developing
Yep.
the scopes of work
Yep.
that you would have for more traditional design development.
From our perspective, we typically see people who've been doing pre-construction for a very long time. They have these heuristics about what things will be impacted. To Micah's point, fire stopping, there are various other ones too. Like missed metals ends up being a catch-all for typically supplying metal items like embeds and bollards and things like that. And you will, to the extent some design requirement creates an obligation on missed metals, now that's going to be impacted and it's going to increase. But a good pre-con professional will know off the top of their head. They'll have this tribal knowledge that if I touch this, I've now just created downstream obligations for these 4 trades.
Yeah. A lot of times it comes down to sequencing too. Who's on site, right? If someone's not showing up for 6 months, you don't necessarily want to have them mobilize 6 months sooner to go set an embed, right? When they're pouring concrete. So
Great.
How
Okay,
have you found this
go ahead.
change, Micah, can you tell us a little bit about how Knutson's using AI and then how these problems have maybe gotten worse or better over time?
sure. We've had a pretty open mind to AI in general, and there's people running wild a bit, and need to be, pulled back here and there. But I mean, there's a lot of OMs hitting expense reports and things like that. We have started to now feel the limit of token spend or start to see those charges as we're starting to play with things, which is now a new perspective. But I would also say I went into the year budgeting for it, even though I'd never spent money on a token. I'd only spent money on licensing, but now I budgeted for tokens just seeing that it was coming, and we're approaching that. So I'd say we're open. We do have a data and analytics team that is trying to, I would say, do the more formal corporate stuff for pinging our ERP, for working with our data lake, creating these internal layers that's only really useful to Knutson. For instance, I built an agent recently for just finding our old projects. Like, when have we built a clinic with these parameters, right? And who are the subs
House.
or all of that? Yeah. So we built things like that, that are more internal. There's another one that's half baked on just combing city council meeting minutes and agendas for construction projects that are going to be talked about, right? That's something that business development people would do before. Now, if it can be looking in a certain area and pulling those, extracting information, that's something that can save a lot of time. In Precon specifically, we have a lot of workflows that are just very menial, right? So we're piloting things, we're testing stuff. LLMs are helpful, certainly in just a lot of, the next level, Google, creating documents, stuff like that. The next stage that we're looking forward to, and I think it's likely through going to be partners and not building our own software, is like descoping, bid analysis, stuff like that, or at least to take the 90% out, right? Because that's where a ton of time gets spent.
Yeah, totally. Oh man, I was going to ask this question. What is the Knutson approach to building in-house versus partnering? I was talking to a contractor yesterday. They were really swayed by this consultant. They spent $70,000 on a proof of value, and he was kicking himself because he's like, we actually got nothing out of it. And it's not like I see this as a general trend, but it does seem to carry that I find construction companies are a lot more willing to spend money on consulting engagements for the promise of having software in-house or owning the data versus, let's say, going to market and picking something off the shelf. Do you think that's true, or do you have any comments on that trend?
Yeah, I partly want to say ask me in a year because I'm about to walk into an experiment one way or the other. So we are standing up facility condition assessment. We're hiring a director. They'll be on my team. And something our clients have been asking for, we have been kind of doing it, but we want to create a software or buy a software where we can go inspect an old building, look at the enclosure, look at the mechanicals, document it, inventory it, create the size, maybe drone scan it, thermal image it. Well, you can think of a lot of workflows there where with reality capture and what can we tie together to create this inventory, then create it into a capital plan, and when do their roofs reach end of life and how much does that cost and what does it look like for cash flow. So you can start to see how someone with a bunch of token budget could build something, but I've also known enough and learned enough that we could create a lot of slop, and we are not developers. And then hardware will change, everything else, and then just to go back through that code, make it work again, will be impossible. So I feel like I'm going into it with caution, but also looking at the price tag of some of the legacy solutions out there. I'm like, well, that was built in 2004, right? And what could we build? So there's probably going to be a bit of bootstrapping just as we launch this department to see what's possible, tie together, put a wrapper on it, but then pilot some things. So I feel like I don't have a good answer now because I want to find something to test how bad it is doing it in-house or how good it can be, and just pay someone to do that for us.
Yeah. My rule of thumb here, because we do build our own, we have torn out software that we previously purchased and built it ourselves, though we built software. This is our core competency. If there are a lot of downstream impacts and the benefit of flexibility outweighs the CapEx and the OpEx of both building and maintaining, it's worth it. Like, for example, the software that we built takes every single transcript, extracts objections, feature ideas, bug reports, etc. That's an essential data lake that powers many downstream apps within Provision, both into Slack and into where we manage our product and into HubSpot, etc. That was previously locked behind a vendor's subscription fee. Wasn't worth it for us. We actually couldn't touch that data. I couldn't query it. I couldn't plug it via MCP into Claude at the time. That's worth it for us. But still, like, I just spent $200 a year on time tracking software because I'm like, I can't, like, this is, the cost is so cheap relative to what I'd have to spend to maintain this and build this. It's just off the shelf. But for construction companies, I still think something should be built in-house because now you can.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like the stuff we have built in-house, those random little tools, like I feel like we can get our arms around that but maybe an FCA thing where we might want a client portal where they can go access all their real estate and then do some of their own workflows in that, manage work orders. Like it just goes on and on. Like I don't know if we want to own something like that.
Yeah,
Mike,
I
what's your
feel like
perspective on that? Like, I feel like, I know, Mike, I know you build your own software internally, but what are you seeing from your customers?
For our customers, anything that can be done by one person on one computer, they're leaning in and building it themselves. Anything that's cross-functional is where things start to break. So if you're trying to engage with a third party, like a subcontractor or a rep or an OEM, those are where things break, and those are where like partners can help.
Mm,
But every customer that we've implemented or that's not the right word, rolled out with, we sit with them, we get them set up in Claude, we help them. We have a list of skills that we give them so they can leverage technology. We're starting to build out Build Vision's MCP to start allowing them to call in Claude to do these actions. And then anything that's hard, complicated, or outside of that workflow, like one user, we're telling customers that they should rely on Build Vision to do that. But everything besides that, they should be like trying to leverage Claude as best as possible. Us internally, our engineers are like at their gills building technology. So I'd rather pay for a software. For example, we use a software, a CRM called Monaco, Luigi, that does a lot of what you just talked about for $30K a year.
mm,
For our entire team, no maintenance by us. It has an MTP. I can call it in Claude. It connects to every downstream system. So there's a trigger. There's a trigger on that. We're also like from our token budget, last month we spent $6,000 with Claude using tokens. Spent 30 with Gemini. So like those numbers are starting to get higher. So if there's opportunity to reduce those costs, that's where we'll really spend time and resources. I can't imagine as a contractor that's like actually living in the real world of having a P&L, having to manage those costs. You hear the horror stories about like Meta and Amazon burning $500 million in tokens. A general contractor can't go spend $2 million in tokens in a month. That's like
mm.
breaking their entire model. So that's where I'd be cautious of. And that's what we've told customers. I joked before we went live, I gave one of our customers my ramp card so that he wouldn't have to worry about his token spend and I can control it for him. Because again, like these customers aren't about building AI tools. They're about like facilitating and servicing their customers or their clients. So what can we do to make that better for them is really the goal.
Yeah, I see a future in, at least in software and construction, where like there are many solutions, but you have to assume that people are going to be using Claude and ChatGPT as part of the daily use, and you have to work within that. You actually can't fight it.
It's like Microsoft. Like I use Microsoft Outlook. Or cool. Like how can I integrate with Microsoft Outlook? And then the software companies have
Yeah,
to
of
bend
course.
over. Like we use Pylon so that we can use our Slack instance to talk to our customers' Microsoft Teams Outlook instances, so they don't have to leave their instance.
Mm.
So like this is the next iteration. Hey, every general contractor, every subcontractor, every rep, every manufacturer has Microsoft. You need to learn how to play nice in the pond with Microsoft. Now every one of those PR parties is going to have access to Claude or OpenAI. How do you play nice in the pond with that?
Micah, I'm curious. One of the things I feel I've learned about construction technology is that it's rarely the technology that's the limiting factor on sort of realizing value. It's often adoption, like sustaining adoption across project teams over time. Like I know you're on the FCA side, you're sort of kicking off the experiment with some of these other tools that you've been developing internally. Like how do you reckon with that? Is it a problem for you? Is it easy?
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. It's something that is incredibly frustrating as someone that's willing to rip the roots out of anything at any moment and change, right? With people that want to do things the way they did it their first 5 years of their career. And there's a lot of that in construction, I would say, where people, they learned one way, they have their own workflow. They can't, just don't like change. So it can be frustrating, but not knowing how to navigate it would be worse. So to me, I feel like it's more just on the people side, bringing them along, make sure they feel heard and that their ideas are getting incorporated, to find out what about their workflow is, their secret sauce that we want to incorporate. I mean, a lot of times we find out that, it's just what they know and they just want to feel heard more than anything because a lot of those changes don't come along. So it's, to me, it's more the human side outside of the technology and just coaching people that change is here, it's coming, it's not going to stop changing. But when I've gotten it out of order and started with change and don't bring people along, it fails. So
What they call that silent churn. As a software vendor, if people aren't using your tool, but you've signed the contract, it's like it's really not a good thing. And I'd imagine within a firm, you spend all this money evaluating people, you bring them in, and then like, okay, people aren't adopting my tool. What's going on? I hear it a lot.
Yeah.
Not for provision, but for others, less good construction software companies.
Yeah, and I would say I'm guilty of creating that situation because I'll go buy software because I can see the vision and I know it's not all the way there. But then if no one else will adopt it and I'm not even the one doing the day-to-day work,
Mm.
that's not good necessarily. I need to have it be someone else's idea, maybe provide the exposure to these things, find a champion, and then build a team around it.
Yeah. So like you're not in favor of top down, like you think grassroots bottom up is the right way to get software properly adopted within a firm.
I haven't thought about it, honestly, but thinking about it now, like when I came into Knutson 13 years ago, they didn't have Bluebeam. I'd been using it in college and in my residential career. And I just started making noise about it, saying, can I buy it for myself? I'm a project engineer. I touch PDFs all day. And then I ended up becoming the champion, trained in all of our offices, right? And then it was PlanGrid, and then it was new scheduling software. And I think when you get some energy around things bottom up, it works better because I know at the time the leadership, they didn't know. They're like, PDF software, who cares, right? But Bluebeam was the flavor at the time, right? It impacted me so much that if they wouldn't have switched, I would imagine I'd gone somewhere else, that was more open to change.
Speaking of that transition, when you joined Knutson, you were a PM. You moved into pre-con. I usually see the other way around. What inspired that change? Why go from the field into pre-con?
It was really not for a big reason other than I was on hard bid public projects and they were a dogfight every day. It made me a really good contractor, knowing our contracts and going to battle with our subcontractors and with the owner. But I knew that we did do negotiated work, and I just made it known that I'd like to try more negotiated work. I felt like it fit my personality of being more collaborative and things. And then I got approached and saying, "Well, would you consider pre-con?" Because that's where a lot of the negotiated projects start. And my background was in custom home building, where did everything. I was the estimator, I was the PM, I was the superintendent. Sometimes I jumped down the hole with a shovel if they were a guy short, right? So, and thinking back at the time when I was evaluating it, I really enjoyed setting up the project to make my future job easier, right? And just working with the clients, figuring out their selections, doing all those things. But then in the future, being a project manager for that was easier. So I felt like I could figure it out if nothing else, and then it just stuck. I think it does fit my nature.
How do you see pre-con teams evolving? Like I imagine pre-con there was like, I don't know when you made the transition, but like not that long ago, it was estimating and then like maybe some extra meetings with the client like along the way. But now it's this sort of sometimes dizzying array of services and different specialized team members and just this ever-growing constellation. Like where's it going and how do you think about that?
I think it's going more and more. I mean, just more and more services, like I mentioned, FCA, things like that. There's more upstream things. I was actually challenging an owner this past week on a program we were given for a hospital expansion that I thought their program was wrong, right? Or just their grossing factors and things. It's just like architecture and design, but they also kind of depend on that too because they might not want to engage an architect and they just think they're asking for budgeting. So the type of people it requires is changing. I really look for really good problem solvers and people that are just good with people and collaborative and no ego. My last two estimator hires were mechanical engineering grads, but they weren't prototypical engineers in the sense that they didn't really go sit behind the screen for their first 5 years. They wanted to be around people, they wanted to solve problems. They're really smart. It's like, well, I can teach you construction estimating. And at least one of them is certainly going to be, going down a pre-construction path. One of them still really likes mechanical. Maybe it'd be a mechanical pre-con manager path, and we can work that out. But it's made me look in other areas. When I hire a prototypical estimator, they want to estimate. They don't want to be in front of clients necessarily. So I think it changes. I know people have hired architects. I'm open to it if they really have that problem solving gene in them, right? Then they'd be a great fit. But I think that's what's changing. And to me, estimating truly is about being accurate and right. And that's never going to change, especially for self-perform work and productivities. Like, so we're standing up an estimating department that's never going to change. We need those principles perfect. But pre-con is a lot more of a open space, providing service, getting at and then asking the right questions. And I always say generating proactive work that no one even asked for, right? So you're like, what is the best use of time right now? What is no one else thinking of that we could do? What should we be talking about, right? And then prioritizing all of that, setting up those proactive meetings, creating matrices of geothermal versus all of these things to like get to those answers so design can progress. A lot of times things lurch to a stop because people come to those crossroads too late.
And how is technology impacting that? If you have like the accurate side and the more open, proactive, open field side, like where is impacts across the board? Is one side more impacted by AI and other technologies?
Yeah, I would say estimating is certainly going to be impacted because first of all, it's really hard to find estimators that want to do that. So quantity takeoff, all of that stuff, just managing the historical database, working with unstructured data to get them through their process faster. What's interesting is on like the pre-con manager side, to me, my ideal way is a lot of times it's a blank mural board to start. It's like, okay, what is our teaming structure? How are we going to meet? How are we going to work together, right? And you're mind mapping this unique group of people that's coming together and then building structure around it. There isn't many apps for that right now, right? Maybe there will be. I'm looking at you, Andrew. I don't know.
Yeah.
That it's like, but I feel like the ones that get the most, where the project was enjoyable and fun and successful, it's because we stepped back, decided how we're going to work together, how we're going to treat each other, how do we make decisions. But a lot of that is, yeah, kind of mind mapping and then being the one that's putting people's nose back into that. Say, okay, is this the right meeting we need? Do we need this meeting anymore? Right? Maybe we need a different meeting, a different group, right? What are the users are missing? So things like that, which again typically was an architect's role, but I feel like isn't always picked up.
Sounds like risk. I'm kidding. I don't
Yeah.
know what the risk is, and like running a team well. But, so on the estimating side, like where do the estimators of the future come from? Like, don't junior estimate, like the story I've heard over and over is junior estimators start by doing QTO, learn projects that way, and eventually graduate to doing more and more of estimating. And then after 30 to 40 years are ready to do like the hardest conceptual estimating where there's nothing but a blank sheet of paper. Where if those tasks are getting automated and replaced, like how does that change the pipeline? How does that change the shape of the team? Like sort of division by seniority? Are there more junior people, fewer junior people? How do you become a senior person? I don't know if you've encountered any of
Yeah,
that yet.
a little bit. I mean, I feel like the best estimators, they could be 2 years into their career or 6 or 16, right? They're ones that actually understand what's being asked of them because a lot of people can be trained on a process and say, okay, I'm working on a DD estimate or I'm working on whatever it is. But a lot of times it is, what is the result of this? And this may be a little bit more on the pre-con side too, is, okay, I got to ask this question. I could go spend 20 hours on this and get to the bottom of it, or I could spend 2 hours using the technology that's available. Especially, I mean, even with these LLMs right now, you can get dangerously close or into a ballpark and say, okay, is this still a real project, right? So I just feel like the best problem solvers and that can look at something a different way and question the question, they're the ones that say, what am I actually working on right now? What's needed of me and what can technology solve for me? They're the ones that are going to be able to elevate through because the biggest problem a lot of estimators have is delegation, thinking that they're the only ones that can do it. They pile themselves up, work all-nighters, and they build these amazing deliverables that are absolutely perfect. But is that even actually what anyone needed? Because there still could be all this contingency or something on it anyways, right? So I always just think about like moving forward. I heard recently, or maybe it was on LinkedIn, about the speed of pre-con for the Empire State Building was like 3 weeks or something. And for some reason, we're stretching pre-con into months and months or years, right? So
Do you think pre-con is getting easier or harder with all these tools? Like if you look at your day and you compare yourself to when you're doing pre-con 5 years, maybe pre-LLMs, what would you say? The same, better, worse?
I think we're in a unique spot where it's getting worse, but it's self-inflicted. I feel like just workload management and the growth that we've gone through, I've been using the term around here that the wheels have fallen off some time ago, right? Like we got to get back, create a little bit more process, be able to automate some more things. So we have more people working harder, trying to use the tools that are available to help them on their one task, but it becomes less and less repeatable. And we keep bringing more people, applying people to the equation. So speaking for our own situation right now, like I'm open about the fact that we are working harder than we need to be. I mean, we're winning good projects. Projects are being set up successfully, but the human capital is kind of outrageous right now.
I see. So you're suffering from success at Knutson.
Yeah, and kind of lack of
That's great.
process. And I built my brand on not liking SOPs and relying on people's ingenuity, but that can only go so far, and not everyone's wired that way. So I think we need to establish a little bit more
Mm,
process and
yeah.
repeatable things. So every time isn't Groundhog Day, right? That we're starting over. And we certainly do have some, but when you hit growth, it starts to feel like, well, we don't have the process for this amount in a year, right? So
Great. So one thing you mentioned that I know you wanted to touch on was the time from sort of project initiation, the time from concept through to the end of pre-con, and how it's stretching out. There's more and more people involved and more layers of consultants. Could you expand on that?
yeah, I mean, there's need for it because the complexity is going up. But what I still find kind of amazing is how siloed everyone is, right? And they're not working on the same problem at the same time. So everyone shows up to these milestones with uncoordinated information. And then the contractors now trying to mesh it all, trying to figure it all out. And it turns out no one ever talked to anyone. You have a landscape architect working in a vacuum, and there's someone working on utilities and doing all this. And so not to point fingers at the
Let's point fingers. Who's the
design.
worst? Who's the worst? I'm kidding.
Who do you hate on this podcast?
Yeah.
I mean, these are very talented people, but I think the collaboration is missing, even though there's so much, just brain power going into these things, right? And I kind of lost my train of thought, but what it ends up is it just stretches so far out. So to me, I feel like, the model is supposed to be the way, right? Everyone's going to work in the same model. Well, a lot of times we sync up with the model and we're looking, and it turns out, people actually aren't syncing into it even weekly at times, right? Or whatever. So then there's these big data dumps and half the team's late and whatever else. So looking at solutions, that's where I feel like the newer delivery methods where design build, it becomes a thing where if you give a contractor a hard problem and minimal margin and everything, they're going to get there. But I think these collaborative delivery methods where you're going to hire the best of the best in all these different silos, that's where I feel like things get stretched out.
So you're like anti-IPD. You're not a fan of that model.
Traditionally, I have been a fan of it. I've attended the conferences. We've done a hospital using IPD, and it works. There's huge keystone parts of it that do work. The big room, I think, is actually good. So like the things that make it work are good. But what happened with IPT, at least in the Midwest, is everyone wanted IPD light. So they wanted to do pole planning. They wanted to do this or that. No one wanted to sign the contract, which just means everyone's still at odds and not actually incentivized to collaborate, right?
So people would want the benefits, but what was the hesitation with actually, putting ink on paper?
Putting their margin at risk in
I
a
see.
pool. In a pool,
Okay.
if everyone shares the spoils, right? That's where we've seen it fall apart. Where owners will say, "Well, you guys can all sign the same agreement and share profit. We're not going to, put our bucket in there." So then everyone ends up in their same camps. So there's a lot of good about IPD, and that's where I kind of go back to like progressive design build or design build. I feel like we've gotten a lot of good feedback from architects that have done design build with us. And they said that was our most profitable project. That was fun, right? A lot of times architects need constraints. So if they're working with someone that says, you can do that, but we don't have any money for it or whatever else, or that grand stair that you had, just looking at it, that's twice. How about you work in these constraints, right? And then they only design once, right? And things I just feel like are moving instead of this halt and start that a lot of times this team at risk methods just create.
Sounds like you're centralizing. You got like sort of a single point of responsibility for moving the project forward and the contractor in those cases, and so there's like a little bit more both authority, probably the stick of the contract, but also just incentive to align all these other stakeholders who are moving forward. So like, you want to be in charge.
Yeah, and I'm realizing I was saying that I feel like I'm positioning the contractor as that, but no, there's a lot of contractors that might disagree and wouldn't want that.
Who was it? I feel like it might have been Turner, Mike, and I ask because if it's a Turner thing, I'm sure you know, like the positioning themselves as an integrator. No, it was I think it might have been Kaiser. It was like a big healthcare system was talking about having an integrator layer, like in the way that they think about delivery, where yeah, stuff gets built and stuff gets designed and consultants solve different things, but there's an integrator layer where the primary responsibility is integrating all these parts and pieces, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think like, if you zoom, like the hard part about specifically like Kaiser as an example, they are pushing that is like 90% of the cost for Kaiser is post construction, right? They're operating the building and then they go engage with like their service contracts, their manufacturers of equipment. So like they have to put a lot of resources in up front to build a building, but that switch happened as soon as the building's done. And now we have this implementation of running the building. So you're starting to see subcontractors grow. Limbach in DC is an example that will go directly to hospital systems and say, hey, we'll do the renovation. We'll go outsource the GC work. We'll go outsource the drywall, but we own the main mechanical systems because we know your system. I think that value works really well because they're kind of acting as that integrator there. They're going, hey, we have this 10-year service contract with you to make sure everything goes right. Why would you go third party, bring somebody else in, bring another mechanical subcontractor in when John's on the job site every day? John knows your facilities guys, stuff like that. And I think that's a very interesting play, and we're starting to see that more and more across the board because it's like data centers are doing this at scale. Meta builds a data center in Louisiana. All right, cool. They brought 3,000 people to that job site. Well, what's going to happen as soon as everyone leaves that job site? They still need a couple hundred electricians because if that GPU goes down on Thursday and Luigi can't make his yellow background for provision, he's gonna, there's going to be hell to pay.
Untenable. Why would you say something like that?
Don't make Luigi call Mark Zuckerberg on the phone. So that's interesting. So trades are trying to go later and later and hold operations. What's interesting is the facility condition assessment. That would be, I don't remember a DBIA standard contract for facility condition assessment. I would say that's usually, that's a capital planning. That's like pre-project initiation for design build. Like how does this role extend beyond earlier, later than maybe a more traditional contract agreement?
Yeah, and I haven't actually looked at what we would use for a contract yet, but what we see in the market is that if you can get in on facility condition assessment and then ideally even get someone into a portal, we'll call it, where all their real estate is, and they can do their planning within it, their work order systems for all their maintenance, all of that. But you own the keys to that, but you're also forecasting their future construction and everything else. You're just better seated as their partner going forever, right? And then full circle for the warranty work and everything else. So really, it's just more about getting into places before they even know they need a project, right?
And would an owner accept that? Like they're sort of, if they're really locking themselves in, like, okay, I'm working with Knutson, I've got this, like I can only do the FCA and I can see everything that's going on, and like, yeah, that light's burned out, like I can do a work order just for that. Like, does it I would like, what I've heard is like big institutional owners are very thoughtful about keeping multiple builders fed at any one time.
Yeah.
They want to keep market pressure on pricing, and so they're always spreading work around to a certain degree because they don't want to wake up and have there be only one builder who can do their work in their market.
Yeah. And for those big institutional owners, you're absolutely correct. But a lot of times it's, what about this rural school district that has 8 buildings? They have one guy that runs around and mows the grass.
So they're not
Hardly knows how to.
they're not gonna do the technology. Like they're
Exactly.
not
Right.
equipped to set that up.
Right. And they just need who do I call, right? My roof's leaking or whatever. And if you can help them succeed at their job, right? So it's not necessarily the massive health systems or the big universities. We may do a FCA for them, but it's just going under that address for that building and Knutson happened to do it, right? But the other ones have is nothing, right? And they're just firefighting.
Okay. And so you're able to package more and deliver more to them.
Yeah.
Okay, and that puts you in prime spot for the small jobs, and then for once every 10 years when they get a bond measure and are building a new building or
Yep.
doing a substantial renovation, you're in the prime position there. Okay.
And we would help them come up with that referendum amount, that they need to go to their tax base or whatever for. We're just there a lot sooner, and now we know the players and everything else. So it's kind of a lost leader. We certainly can get paid for it, but it's just getting in there before our competition.
Yeah.
No, we're running up on time. Micah, do you mind if we do a quick speed fire round?
Do it.
Okay. 5 years from now, what's going to be the dominant contract model?
I'll say progressive design build.
Design build. Okay. Which one's going to be on the rise?
I will go fixed price design build. I'm just assuming that owners are progressive enough to realize this, So
5 years from
this is where
now.
it actually be is it won't change, and there'll be people still.
Okay, 5 years from now, is it still as hard to hire estimators? Yes or no?
No, because I think a lot of it is going to be done by a computer. So to me, it changes who can do it.
Okay. Will Knutson in 5 years be buying more software or building more software?
Both. I think we're going to be buying more. I mean, everything is software, but I also think it allows us to create this internal stuff, right? That no one would ever build a use case around of building a third-party one for, right? Because it'd be so particular.
Got it. Okay. Construction, general contractor construction margins, are they flat, increasing, or decreasing in 5 years?
I think decreasing. And it's just who can figure out.
Mike is licking his lips right now. Mike has this prevailing theory about general contractor margins, but yes.
That it's going down or that it's going up?
Contractor margins will be the cost of customer acquisition, so they can erode away to 0%, and then you'll offer additional services to actually make money. You get for example, you'd use an STI policy, CSIP, you guys would do your FCA, all these other services, better margins for you. So you'll drive towards that as opposed to worrying about the fee that you're getting around a project.
Okay. So I think we're saying the same thing. Fees are going down, but yeah, margin is going up. Margin on the back end on the books will go up. Yeah. Construction fees, what's on the contract.
Okay. Well, in 5 years, will any estimators be doing manual quantity takeoffs? Yes or no?
I doubt it.
And choose a model company to invest in, OpenAI or Anthropic?
Anthropic. I mean, I think what everyone realized in the past 6 months is that it actually can do work and not just butter me up. I still use.
That's a great point, Micah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
It's
and what
not
you
that I
called
was
out is
buttering
something
you up.
real.
It's that.
Yeah. But now Claude, I'm disagreeing with. I'm like, hey, you work for me. Tells me I asked the wrong question too much.
It is. I think they built that into its personality to be a little bit more disagreeable because of how sycophantic ChatGPT was. But yeah, sometimes it does disagree with me too, which is fine.
Guys, I do have to hop for another call. Sorry, it was
okay, Mike. See you.
10.
Thanks, Mike.
Great to meet you.
We'll wrap up with Micah. Okay, Andrew, any from you? Any? No. Okay, great.
Thank you so much, Micah.
This was fantastic. Thanks for the great conversation.
Sounds good. Nice to see you all.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Enjoy your bike ride.
Thanks. See ya.
Take care.